Well, there are many elements to this Trump tax story. Let's work through them. We know the Democrats say the public have to know who the president owes money to as a question of national security. And we're going to look at political reaction in detail in a moment. But if you haven't seen the New York Times story, here are some of the many claims. It reports that in 2016, the year Mr. Trump won the election, and during his first year in office, he paid $750 in federal income taxes. He also paid no income tax in 10 of the past 15 years. The Times also reports that in the first 2 years as president, Mr. Trump made $73 million in revenue from overseas. This includes licensing deals worth millions in countries like the Philippines, India and Turkey. And of course, those statistics raise questions about potential conflicts of interest. And the Times also suggests Mr. Trump's finances are in a precarious position. It reports that within the next 4 years, more than $300 million of loans for which he's personally liable will become due. Well, Timothy O'Brien is a biographer of Donald Trump. He knows the president in detail. He's tweeted 2 broad takeaways from Trump's tax returns. 1, average Americans pay taxes, but he doesn't, and he's laughing at the people who elected him. Of course, he would deny that. 2, gorging on debt has left him financially vulnerable, and that makes him a national security threat. Well, Mr. Trump has responded to the New York Times story. Here's some of his defense.
It's totally fake news, made up, fake. We went through the same stories. You could have asked me the same questions 4 years ago. I had to litigate this and talk about it. Totally fake news.
Well, the president may say it's all fake, but the New York Times has a long track record of being very accurate. And the difference here is the New York Times is saying it has Mr. Trump's tax returns. We've also seen this tweet from the president. The fake news media, he says, just like election time 2016, is bringing up my taxes and all sorts of other nonsense with illegally obtained information and only bad intent. I paid many millions of dollars in taxes and was entitled, like everyone else, to depreciation and tax credits. It's worth emphasising the issue, though, here is federal income tax. Taxes come in many forms, VAT, property tax and so on. The New York Times claims are focused on federal income tax. The president is right, though, that this issue has come up before. Here's a clip from one of his debates with the Democratic candidate Hillary Clinton.
Maybe he doesn't want the American people, all of you watching tonight, to know that he's paid nothing in federal taxes, because the only years that anybody's ever seen were a couple of years when he had to turn them over to state authorities when he was trying to get a casino license, and they showed he didn't pay any federal income tax. So if he's paid zero, that means...
Now, there's no legal obligation for Mr. Trump to release his own tax returns, but it is customary, and every president since Gerald Ford in the 1970s has done so. Here's Mr. Trump again in that 2016 debate outlining why he isn't releasing his tax returns.
I don't mind releasing. I'm under a routine audit, and it'll be released. And as soon as the audit's finished, it'll be released.
Well, the investigation conducted by the New York Times provides more details about the circumstances of that audit by the American Internal Revenue Service. You'll see it called the IRS. That investigation stems from a 2010 tax refund worth almost $73 million that Donald Trump claimed after declaring huge losses. If the IRS rules against him, he may have to pay more than $100 million. And contrary to the president's comments that we just saw there, he could release those tax returns if he wanted to. This article from BBC Reality Check helps us with that. It says there's nothing stopping him from releasing those returns while that IRS audit is underway. Well, if that's the detail of the allegations, next to the political fallout, here's Tom Burgess, investigations correspondent for the Financial Times.
It shows us that he's doing something that undermines the absolute foundations of how democracy works. In a democracy, we choose our rulers and we trust them to take decisions for the collective good, not for their personal financial interests. Where rulers start to take decisions for their own interests, democracy breaks down. And what we see in the New York Times stories is that the way Donald Trump is sustaining himself, sustaining his wealth, appears to be by monetizing the highest office in the free world.
Well, as you might expect, leading Democrats have been responding to all of this. Here's Senator Elizabeth Warren tweeting, he knows better than anyone there's one set of rules for the wealthy and giant corporations and another for hard-working Americans, and he's taken advantage of it at every turn. Or you could read Congresswoman Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez saying Donald Trump has never cared for our country more than he cares for himself. a walking scam, she says. And the Democrat Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, has spoken to MSNBC. She says the public needs to know who the president owes money to. She said, "To me, this is a national security question." And picking up on that issue, here's The Economist's US editor on why national security matters.
That's one of the things that isn't answered in the returns that the New York Times have, and that's still a big question, really. Who lent money to Donald Trump after he kept going bankrupt? A lot of the big New York banks, American banks, wouldn't lend him anymore. Deutsche Bank lent him some money. But I think Nancy Pelosi is saying, I think it's right to say that American voters probably ought to know who Donald Trump owes money to.
Well, next, let's hear from the BBC's Barbara Plett-Usher in Washington, D.C. with more on the significance of this story.
These allegations go to the heart of Mr. Trump's appeal. He sold himself as a successful businessman who looked after the little guy, the average Joe. And that was a particularly appealing message to white blue-collar voters in Midwestern swing states, which backed him and which Mr. Biden is trying to win back. So he will undoubtedly press in on that, especially in the debate in the next 24 hours now, 48 hours, pointing out his argument will be that Mr. Trump is not a successful businessman. In fact, his businesses have been hemorrhaging money, and that he's paying less tax than the average Joe.
Now, as you'd expect, the Biden campaign has not wasted any time in getting onto this issue. The campaign's website is already selling stickers saying, "I paid more income tax than Trump," and the Team Joe campaign has already produced this video. And you can see the point that the Biden campaign is making there, that people doing regular jobs are paying much, much more income tax than the New York Times is reporting Donald Trump has. Well, let's bring in Julia Manchester, regular correspondent here on Outside Source, political reporter for The Hill. Nice to see you, Julia. We've heard some defence from Donald Trump, but beyond that, have Republicans been coming to stand by his side?
I think you're hearing a lot of Republicans try to skirt their way around this. I mean, President Trump is calling this fake news. Others are calling it fake news, saying the timing of this is very suspect, given this comes just one day before the first presidential debate between Joe Biden and President Trump. But Republicans, I would imagine, very much have a headache right now, because once again, they've been forced to play cleanup with something regarding the president. Last week it was President Trump refusing to commit to a peaceful transition of power. Now there's this issue of his tax returns that were released in the New York Times, or sources gave details to the New York Times about the tax returns. So Republicans definitely on the defense right now, and this is not something they want to be talking about.
And I just want to be clear, while the president says fake news, there's no evidence I've seen to suggest that the New York Times has fabricated all of this reporting. It's not released its sources, but there's no particular reason for us to doubt what it's saying.
No particular reason. And I think the term fake news and President Trump's messaging on this is really a kind of reassurance to his supporters right now. Look, I don't think this report is going to change any minds in the election. Maybe it has an impact on swing voters who are still deciding, but there's very few of those right now. President Trump's supporters will indeed say this is fake news, that they don't believe it, that they're suspicious of it, etc. This is President Trump definitely talking to them. However, on Tuesday night, it'll be interesting to see how Joe Biden approaches this issue and how Joe Biden's campaign really messages on this. They're already trying to differentiate themselves from President Trump with this Scranton versus Park Avenue message. Scranton being the working class city in Pennsylvania Joe Biden is from, and Park Avenue being where President Trump lives in New York City.
Don't go anywhere, Julia. One other big story I need to ask you about, because President Trump's pick to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the US Supreme Court will begin meeting with senators this week. Here's footage from the press conference where Amy Coney Barrett was unveiled as the nominee. This was on Saturday. And if she makes it through the confirmation process, she'll be the third Supreme Court justice to be appointed by Mr. Trump. In recent history, only Ronald Reagan and Richard Nixon have appointed more. Television ad campaigns both for and against her are already in the works, and the progressive group Demand Justice has already earmarked $10 million for the campaign. Its executive director tweets, "No confirmation till after Inauguration Day." That's in reference to the Republicans blocking the confirmation of President Obama's pick in 2016 because it was an election year. A group backing President Trump, America First Policies, has pledged $5 million in ads to support her. The first one will play during the debate tomorrow. Now, I'm curious, Julia, why are both sides spending millions of dollars on adverts when in the end this boils down to 50 senators doing what they say they're going to do?
Right. So at this point, Senate Republicans have a very large chance of pushing Amy Coney Barrett through and getting a vote on this, or potentially getting a hearing on this. There's not much Senate Democrats can do right now, except maybe delay the hearing until after the election. And in that case, if Democrats take back the Senate, Amy Coney Barrett may not be confirmed. So right now, you're seeing a lot of political messaging on this, because this is President Trump and his base saying, look, this is President Trump's third Supreme Court nominee during his presidency. He's already packed the courts at the lower court level as well as the United States. He is keeping true to his campaign promise. However, Democrats are saying, look, if this happens, if she is appointed to or voted into this position, we need to have a fallback. We need to make sure that Democrats control the Senate, that we get Democrats elected and elected Joe Biden so he can appoint more liberal justices or judges to lower courts across the country.